The topic that was on my mind is that of marriage. I want to talk about why marriage is so hard. Marriage or relationships is something that I have a deep interest in, which is why I chose to write a book about marriage as my very first book. I could have written about any topic that I would have liked, and this whole entire the possibilities were endless. But I chose to write about marriage and love because I just am deeply fascinated by it. I like to learn about it. I think everyone, to some extent, enjoys relationship. Um, so yeah, with that being said, I want to talk about why marriage, especially, not dating, not um, anything in the first stages of love, but why marriage in particular is excruciatingly difficult, and which is why so little people succeed in this realm. Why is marriage so difficult? The reason that I've come up with, and this is not from reading any other texts, this is purely based off my own life experience. The reason why marriages are so hard is because each person is filled to the brim with trauma. Each person is filled to capacity with trauma. We each have trauma that we carried over from our mother's side, if we had a mother, and the trauma of our father, if we had a father. The combination of one trauma of our mother and one trauma of our father together creates another trauma, another dynamic, which is more complicated. And when we are the children of this three-tiered trauma system, we also inherit all of their trauma into our young lives. Sadly, it doesn't stop there. As we are young lives, we are also faced with the trauma of life's circumstances that occur outside of the family. So, things happen when we're at school, things happen when we're just going about living everyday life. So, all around, we are hit on every side with trauma. Now, so when we grow up, and we become bigger, we are full of trauma, right? Or wounds. And those traumas or wounds get transformed into very scary things. They can become emanations of rage, deep anger. They could transform into jealousy, very deep-seated, deep-rooted jealousy. It could turn into a mental health disorder. It could turn into a complex. It could turn into you hating on yourself, losing self-esteem. There are too many emanations to count. So we've become good at hiding our trauma and developing things to protect ourselves from these traumas. So not only are we wounded at the core, but yet we have all these layers covering our wounds, which adds another level of difficulty to penetrate and to get to the root of the issues. For example, if somebody has developed rage because of their wounds, then that rage is actually the secondary emotion trying to mask whatever it is they're actually feeling, whether it be fear, sadness, grief, insecurity, what have you. So when you have the fear, you have to deal with the fear, that layer, before you can even get to the root cause. So it's already extremely complicated because we have passed down generations of trauma. And now when one person, let's say there's a guy who's seeking to find his mate, finds another person full of trauma, and when they're dating, all is fine because, we don't really penetrate any of the layers. But as soon as you get married and you live in close proximity with each other, then that's when the shit really hits the fan. Because here you have all these traumas and really bad things you grew up with just rubbing on each other. And how is one wounded person who's already so hurt and who can't fix their own problems going to help another wounded person who can't help themselves? How is this going to work? Right? That's why it is so difficult. And that is why so many marriages disintegrate. Because people are too filled with trauma and they do not know, they do not have the right resources or tools to fix those traumas. Essentially, that's all it is. It all boils down to all the pain and suffering everybody is in. Too much pain, too much suffering, not enough tools, not enough wisdom, not enough knowledge to tackle all of these problems. It's very hard. Now, that's why when I was striving to become a nun, I realized that the practice of a nun is actually one of the methods to counter all of this pain and suffering. Because what is the function of a nun? A nun becomes a nun because they want to work on themselves. They recognize that they are imperfect and they have certain personality traits, certain habits, certain things within themselves that needs to be worked on. And so these nuns make it a full-time mission to work on themselves to become better. They're very mindful, they're very self-aware, and they're very focused on overcoming obstacles. Now, when you have a person with that kind of mindset that really wants to overcome all of the past traumas that they've had, all of the negative afflictions that they have, when you have a person that is striving so hard to work on themselves, then there's hope. Because that person is willing to recognize their faults and is willing to work on themselves and is striving to find a better way. And that is why working on yourself, reading those self-help books, and really recognizing our pain, our hurt, and how we hurt others, wanting to become better is the most important attribute a person can have. That is what can save a marriage. If you have one person striving to do all those things and you have one person not, I think maybe it's possible if that person's influence is strong enough to influence the other. If you have two people that are not willing to work on themselves, then I would say the chances are more limited. That is my opinion. If there are two people who are together on the same page and together striving to become better, then that is a strong union. I have faith in that union. That is a relationship that is most likely going to succeed. Working on yourself truly helps. It really makes a difference. It makes a difference on your mental state. It makes a difference in how you act in the world and your influence and impact on other citizens of this planet. It makes a huge difference. The difference is night and day. Everyone may look the same on the outside to some extent. We have arms, we have a face, eyes, nose, hair, legs. But the inside, there are some people that are on a very basic or beginner level, and there are people that just shine with a light which they have developed all their lives, working and working and working to become better. Inside, we are all different levels, and we cannot see that by our mere eyes, but by getting to know somebody. And even then, it's hard to distinguish. But the fact of the matter is we are not equal in our spiritual practice. There are many different levels, And where you are inside will be a big determinant of how your relationships are.